Have you ever noticed that people can walk away from belief in God and yet still spend the rest of their lives trying to hold on to meaning and purpose? They leave their belief because they've lost faith in its truth claims and the high demands, but not the need for meaning that they provide. The need being spirituality, and what's even more interesting, as far as I've observed, is what happens next. There are more people today than ever before leaving organized religion, leaving Christianity, leaving Catholicism, leaving the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, often referred to as the Mormon Church, and it's not casually, not carelessly, but often after years of thought, deep study, and personal struggle as they search for truth. This search is driven by a need for spirituality. Spirituality is a personal search for meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than oneself, such as the divine, nature, or humanity. It involves fostering inner peace, compassion, and awareness, often through practices like rituals, meditation, reflection, or immersing in nature, and can exist independently of or within organized religion. We often hear individuals say things like, "I'm not religious, but I am spiritual." When I refer to a loss of spirituality, I'm speaking of people like Brittany Hartley, who has spoken openly about her journey out of faith and into what she calls a kind of secular spirituality. Or Rhett McLaughlin, who I believe is still working through his faith deconstruction as he's tried to hold on to meaning itself while letting go of belief. Or Alex O'Connor, who represents a more reflective modern atheism. And here, especially where I live, which is right next to Salt Lake City, Utah, this isn't theoretical, it's local. Voices like John Delusion, who was once a believing member of the LDS Church and now hosts conversations with thousands who are navigating doubt, pain, and often deep disappointment. And when you listen carefully, you hear something consistent. These are not shallow conversations. They're personal. They're emotional. They're rooted in real experience. And that matters because people don't just walk away from ideas. They often walk away from full-on life experiences that shaped how they understood those ideas. Now, before we go any further, I want to be very clear. I understand why people struggle with religion and belief. Because when you're dealing with something like a high-demand religion, such as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is the church I belong to, where commitment isn't casual, where sacrifice is real, where even the idea exists that you should be willing to give everything as Christ gave everything to his bride, the church. That's not light. And then you add something else to it. People, imperfect people, people who make mistakes, who say the wrong things, who sometimes hurt others, even while in positions of leadership. And that's real hard stuff to deal with. And it's not unique to one religion either. You see it everywhere. Government, institutions, every human system. So yes, people experience pain, disillusionment, confusion, and for many, that becomes the turning point. So yes, people experience pain, disillusionment, confusion, and for many, that becomes the turning point, and they discard their belief and leave the church. But here's the question. Does human failure mean the source of meaning, of purpose, of truth itself isn't real? Or does it mean that human beings are exactly what we've always known them to be, imperfect? Because if the standard becomes, if people fail, it can't be true, nothing survives that standard. And sometimes the difficulty isn't just what others have done to us, but what we do to ourselves when we don't yet fully understand certain truth claims, when answers feel incomplete, when the supporting facts or evidence haven't yet come clearly into view. Those truths can be misunderstood and set aside as untrue, even though those missing pieces to the puzzle may still come to light in due time and change everything regarding these truth claims. And so, as a result of both conditions, many walk away, not just from the institution, but from belief itself. But something doesn't go away. Something still remains. The need for meaning, for purpose, for connection. In short, that spiritual void is still there. And people respond to that voice in different ways. Some begin reaching for something to fill it, to make sense of it, to give it shape again. It's called reconstructing their spirituality. Others drift toward something much heavier, a kind of nihilism, where meaning feels absent and life begins to lose its structure. And without something solid to anchor to, people can find themselves living without direction, without guardrails. And in some cases, if they're not careful, they end up in a very real kind of despair. And sometimes this reconstruction looks like relationships, achievement, experience, pleasure, identity, Even as I just said, a redefined spirituality. And again, this is not irrational, it's human. But here's where we need to be honest. It's often said people leave and then they rebuild. But that's not always what we actually see. What we often see is something more fragile. We don't see resolution, we see substitution. We don't see fulfillment. We see attempts to fill something that didn't fully go away after deconstruction. The question people find themselves asking is, where is meaning in all of these supposed ways for filling the hole, this need that still lingers? If we're honest with ourselves, we don't just see peace. We also see continued searching, shifting definitions, evolving beliefs, and sometimes a quiet unsettledness underneath it all. Not always visible, but always present. Brittany Hartley is very honest about this journey I've described here. She acknowledges her collapse into nihilism, the loss of meaning, and the need to rebuild something livable, but without the rituals and all the truth claims. In other words, secular spirituality without God. Another way of saying it is atheism spirituality, and what she offers, in my opinion, is thoughtful, intentional, even compassionate. But even with this approach, the question remains, has the original problem been solved by this reconstruction of her spirituality, or is she just trying to manage it? Hasn't Brittany and others like her simply built their own quasi-religion with its own rituals, truth claims, and articles of faith, but not any required moral laws? As you listen to Rhett McLaughlin and the conversations he has with others who've deconstructed their faith, you hear something very human. A longing, not gone, not dismissed, still there. Here's the thing. The beauty of a little newborn, the surge of emotions and feelings stirred by classical songs such as Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6 in B minor, Op. 74, Pathetic. The awe of the night sky filled with galaxies, the feeling of meaning as you fulfill your bucket list. All of these can become the source of your truth in your eyes, and yet all of this comes from the source that's behind our need for meaning that is beyond ourselves. And that's the point we can't ignore. If the need remains, what does that say? If the longing persists, what does that say? If we keep trying to reconstruct meaning after removing its source, what does that suggest about reality itself? And if that's true, then the question changes. It's no longer, can we of ourselves build meaning? It becomes, are we trying to replace something that was never meant to be replaced? In the Doctrine and Covenants, section 1, verse 33, it says, "And he that repents not, from him shall be taken, even the light which he or she has received. For my spirit shall not always strive with man, saith the Lord of hosts." When this spirit of Christ is rejected, its power and might goes away. Almost. Because in the end, we are not just evaluating evidence. We are deciding what we are willing to accept. So before you decide what you believe, ask yourself something more fundamental. Why do I believe it in the first place? Think on that until next time. For now, I wish you continued success in your search for truth, and more importantly, in your willingness to follow it. Goodbye. God bless.